Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for the least listened to podcast on the globe, the Sixth Sense Media Podcast, with your host, Mike Phelan.
How's everything been going with you? It's
Good, good.
been
Yeah.
2 years. I can't believe it.
I know. Tell me about it, because these are the weirdest 2 years ever in the history of life. Like, yeah. I'm like, do we get these years back at the end? How does this work? I would like them added on somehow. I would like store credit for these years.
I'm sure it's been more difficult for you and everyone else in Hollywood and LA trying to make productions happen with all the restrictions.
It is insane. So we filmed I filmed a feature, the movie that we're talking about, we filmed instead of the movie we were originally going to be doing because of COVID, but we filmed that one last October. A quarter of our budget was COVID costs. A quarter of the budget.
Was that for a mask and like a mandatory person to make sure everyone had masks on and off?
100%. So, and the testing. So because, it's unions, so SAG has the requirements. So you have to get tested every 2 days, every 3 days, every whatever it is. And they only accept certain kinds of tests. Of course, they don't accept the rapids, they accept PCR, which is more expensive. So yeah, you're looking at, the costs are just astronomical. And it's crazy because it's like, when you're an indie filmmaker, it's like, that's money that could go to making the production better. And not that I don't believe in keeping people safe, because I do, but come on, it's at a certain point, it gets ridiculous. But it's like, that's very like intangible money you're spending, right? It doesn't increase the value of your production at all. It's just like, so you're like, damn, it's just so much money going to something that doesn't like translate to the quality of the film. You know what I mean? So you're like, oh, it just makes it all the harder to like part with the money. But yeah, it's crazy. So that's more difficult. And then just for me personally, like I work out of Atlanta a lot too as an actress, or I was before COVID, because I have family out there, so I can be a local hire, but it kind of changed the way they do that. Everyone's like tightening the reins a little bit and less likely to work with people who aren't really there right now because they're worried about the travel and the COVID testing and stuff. So it's just kind of like everything's, it's all new and different for all of us, I think. So
how did it affect this production? How did it affect LEXI?
So LEXI was literally born out of the lockdown. So we had a couple things that, like all of us, our plans were just totally waylaid, right? So the project that we talked about last time, Disgraced, we had been gearing up to have a premiere the first week in April. So we had everything set up, good to go. And then, the lockdown happened the end of March. And then we also were planning a production that we were going to be shooting that fall, which we couldn't do because of COVID. So we were like, all right, what can we do where we just embrace these limitations of the lockdown? So we wanted to come up with a story where it was, mostly me in my house. Why am I there? Why am I in my house? Where we could film it that way. That would allow us to shoot in a way that was COVID safe and kind of make the most of the circumstances that we were dealt. So that's how LEXI was born. So it literally, we shot it with, so it's about a blogger, like an influencer who moves into a new house and like weird stuff starts happening. So we use like her own social media posts, which I could just record like as you would like fake blogs. And then she installs Ring cameras because she thinks she's being watched and people like weird things are happening. She wants to see what's going on. So we use the Ring footage of the cameras that she installed around her house. And then we also kind of told it in a mockumentary format with some experts, and we were able to film them one day at a time individually. So that was all COVID easy breezy. So yeah, we just kind of had to come up with a way of filming during the lockdown that, something that we could do and really kind of embrace those limitations. It was kind of an interesting, it was an interesting experience because we're so limited in some ways, but it's kind of a fun creative exercise because you're like, all right, these are our confines, these are the borders of what we're doing. So how can we be creative within that? Like, what can we do that's interesting, or how can we embrace these limitations to make something, unique and whatever. So that's kind of what we did. So it was a very interesting writing exercise because you always had to be thinking, why are we seeing this? Why is she showing this? How did this get out there? Like, you know what I mean? There has to be a reason why we're seeing the security footage, why she puts them up in the first place, all those things. So just layers of questions to ask yourself as a writer.
How stressful was that with the level of creativity you had to put forth to get this done with these restrictions?
Yeah, it was stressful, but it was also a really nice outlet because I think I, like many creatives, it's kind of like a need for me, it's food, water, sleep, and I got to create. So to have everything just pause and not be able, like, not know when I'm going to get my next acting job, not know when production was even going to come back, not know all these things. It was really nice, honestly, to have something to put myself into. That gave me that outlet and allowed me to do that. So very weird, the process of filming it too, because like, my husband was working from home at that time. We got dogs here. That's why I made her have dogs in the thing. Cause I was like, do I shoot around my dogs and like create them all the time? Or do I just make, okay, LEXI has dogs, all these things that we had to think about. So we shot it over like a long period of time because I had to basically do it around like my other work schedule and his work schedule and, you know what I mean, kind of get in where we fit in.
Mhm.
And a lot of it we found in the filming process, because there were things that we'd written in the script that when we tried to actually shoot, it wasn't landing. It kind of didn't, translate as well as we'd hoped. And likewise, we would just get ideas of something that we wanted to try. So I'd be like, oh, let's try this. And then it was just me, experimenting and with the footage and seeing how I liked it. So a lot of it we kind of found during the filming process. So it was a very interesting thing, unlike anything else I'd ever done, just because of the unique nature of it and how we shot it and the circumstances of the time. So it was actually a really cool exercise to do that, I think it really flexes those creative muscles and kind of allowed us to do something unique and just have something to focus on and put our energy in during this weird time, which was really nice.
Without spoiling it,
Yes.
how did you get into the headspace for your character of Lexi and that gradual deterioration that we see?
Yeah, it's funny because I was telling my writing partner about this too, because we wrote it together, and then obviously it was mostly me filming alone, and he felt really lonely because I just hey, I put some new stuff on the drive for you to look at, once we filmed it, and he's oh, checking every day, did you get stuff done today, what is there stuff on there, and a lot of it I would just experiment with and whatever. And I was telling him that it was actually a very interesting acting exercise because I had nothing and no one. It literally was just me. I'm not in a scene with anybody. It's just me. And it was kind of weird also, especially for the vlogs, which is kind of where you see her go crazy.
Mhm.
You see the deterioration in her vlogs, especially. And for those, it's literally me talking to we filmed them on the iPhone because we wanted to look like they do on YouTube and whatnot. So it's me looking into a tiny iPhone camera. It was just a very unique exercise as an actor because, I hadn't ever really done anything quite like that specifically. So I found it a little bit more challenging than I thought I would. It just took me a second to get the groove of it and figure it out. And then once I did it, it was golden. But I think really just kind of, like you said, COVID was a weird time too, especially in the beginning. There was a lot of uncertainty and a lot of, stress and a lot of crazy stuff going on. Obviously, something that none of us had experienced in our lifetime up till then. So I think I was also partly oh yeah, how do I do this? How do I be free as an actor and feel my emotions and let go the way I normally did in this really stressful time where I think we'd all kind of been just hanging on and kind of blocking those emotions. So that was kind of an interesting thing too. So I really just kind of had to find it, settle into it, trust it, oh yeah, I know how to do this again, and kind of find the way. And it was funny too, because we had to warn our neighbors when there's crazy screaming scenes coming up. I do want to have self-tapes too. I'll be hey, I'm getting raped in this self-tape. Everything's cool over here. Don't worry, we're good. So all that kind of stuff is funny. It'll be 3 a.m. and I'm gonna be screaming about ghosts. So don't mind yourself, But it was fun. The ring stuff was especially fun because it was cool to just kind of really shoot it, see how it looked and what worked, and that was a really cool experience. I think there's something kind of this was kind of born out of an idea of, I don't know if you've ever, it's actually believe it or not, a documentary came out during the pandemic after we'd already shot Lexi about the disappearance of this girl at the Cecil Hotel that happened way back in 2013. So there's this footage that went viral way back when she disappeared of her with the elevator. But you can't see what's off camera, and it's very compelling, right? So that is actually what got us the idea for this project. I was there's something so compelling about security camera footage, because it's you only ever watching that kind of stuff if something weird is about to happen, and you feel you shouldn't be watching it because it feels inherently violating and personal. So just for me, I found that footage really compelling, and I liked that idea of things happening just out of frame and off camera, things that you just can't see, you're seeing, a person experiencing it, but you're not seeing what they're experiencing. Yep. So that was kind of where the nugget of inspiration came from with that. And then, it was just so funny that documentary came out after we shot Lexi with 10 years later. I was now they want to come out with it, but no, it's very cool. So every writer ever, as soon as you have an idea, then someone else comes out with it.
How reliable was Ring for doing your recording? Did you find any issues with it?
No, believe it or not, the rings were great. So I had bought 3 different cameras. We already had one in our front door that we actually use. So that one we had, and then I bought 3 to put up in the various rooms in my house, just so I could keep the file, the files labeling clear and whatever. It worked really nicely. It's cool. There's something, it was cool to play with, playing with where we wanted it in the room and what we wanted to see and not see. And again, you're at the mercy of the limitations of my house, the space that I'm in and all that kind of stuff. But I wish that they all, I love the way the door looks, the front door one with that fisheye lens. I wish they all kind of had that look to it. Because I love that so much. But obviously a little harder for us to do stuff outside with the public and people. And you know what I mean? It's really really my neighborhood where I live. So but they were really reliable. It was actually really easy to work with. It kind of has a unique quality to it. So
Did the whole experience of just being you with a handheld camera or with your phone, do you think that's made you better for doing recordings for auditions remotely now?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very specific thing to this. So I think it doesn't necessarily translate to like the self-tape setup. I've been working in that Southeast market for a long time, so I'm kind of familiar with the whole self-tape thing and how that goes. But it was just definitely a learning experience in lots of ways. You know what I mean? In terms of setting things up and again, really like the theme of this project was just like embracing your limitations, kind of leaning into them. So like, you know, keeping it really shadowy and dark on purpose so we can't really see things, rather than like trying to figure out how to light myself with like a lamp and all the, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, there was so it taught me a lot in that kind of way in terms of how to like embrace what you have to work with and make things work.
For the rest of your cast, where did you get them from? Just a casting call, or did you have specific people in mind?
No, so I love working with people over and over again. So this is like, I think LEXI, I think was my, I want to say like 6th or 7th project as a producer. And so at this point, I've worked with a lot of amazing people, whether from class or other projects or things that I've done on my own where I've hired them before. So I knew everybody in this project, especially because it was COVID and this was the early days of COVID, pre-vaccine, you know, pre-everything. So we wanted to reach out to people that we knew, because it's also kind of weird, like, hey, do you mind if we come to your home and film this, or do you want to come to the set and film this thing? We wanted to make sure people felt comfortable with us. They knew who we were. They knew it would be a safe set. So I was really lucky that it was people I'd worked with before. So Susan, who plays Alara, I've actually been in acting class with her for like many, many moons, and she's been in probably like 3 or 4 of my other projects, and she's always amazing. So I had her in mind right away when we wrote it. Tommy, who plays Nate, he was in a project, the web series that you did, that we talked about last time. He was in Disgraced, and he's excellent. Yeah, so I had him in mind. And then Maya was also in Disgraced as well. Felicia too, who played like my friend, and the girl comes and finds me and looks for me. So yeah, everybody in it we knew, and that was by design, just again because of the, you know, the timing of this project and what was going on in the world. We wanted to make sure we could all get tested beforehand. You know, this was before there were even like rules in place as far as how productions were going to come back. We were just kind of being renegades, doing our own thing.
Do you feel like you sometimes psych yourself out in your home now after doing this, hearing things that you know aren't there, but you're just so used to it now that you're kind of hearing it anyway?
That it was funny. I was really actually worried about that. I was like, dude, because obviously those things we had to film at night because of the way the camera like looks. We had to wait till it was actually dark, so because it looks a different way when you turn the lights off. And so yeah, I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna like freak myself out in my own house. You know, this is gonna be so weird. But to be perfectly honest, so I have like a really whacked out sense of humor just in general. So I found some of the stuff that people find scary so funny for reasons I can't explain. Like just because I'd seen it so many times, and I'm like trying, like working up like all the kinks and whatever. So like, for me, actually, I was surprised it didn't end up really freaking me out. I found a lot of it like weirdly funny. So yeah, but it's funny because like one of my cousin was like, oh, like women who live alone were like, I could never do that. Like it's just very interesting, the responses. And like one of my friends was like, where'd you get that blue house? And I was like, dude, that's my house. And she's like, oh yeah. Like it's just funny, people like detach themselves from it. I'm like, you've been to my house. You've said like, oh yeah, it is your house. Like it's funny. So they're like, where'd you get the creepy house? I'm like, well, I'm glad you find it creepy, but actually
what did you find to be the most rewarding out of this project?
I think what's really cool is the way that it was made, because of how we made it and when we made it and why we made it. I felt, and because we found so much of it kind of during the process of making it, I didn't feel that way I often do when I create something, which I think a lot of us do, where you're like, oh, my baby, my precious, you know. I was kind of like, we did a thing. I don't know. What do you think? So I felt kind of strangely like curious about how people would respond, because it was such a kind of unique thing. So I'm just kind of like tickled by whether you like it or you don't like it or whatever. Like I feel a little bit less sensitive about it than I do about other things, which is honestly kind of amazing and nice. And I hope that I'll be able to somehow recreate that feeling going forward with projects. But yeah, for whatever reason, I think, like I said, just because of the fact that it, you know, it's obviously inherently, we had very limited, like, you know, again, a lot of limitations to it. So because of that, I'm like, I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. You know, I'm not saying this is like the next most amazing thing that's gonna blow your mind, but like we think with what we did, a cool thing with what we had to work with, and ended up being pretty compelling. So we were like, oh, this is cool. And even like our DP, we showed him like a really early cut of it before we had finalized how we were doing the interviews. I just brought them in to do like a rehearsal day and shot them on like a kind of like the way that documentaries will do sometimes, where it like fades to black. It's like a straight black background.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, oh, I love this. Like, he's like, can I come on board and like reshoot those interviews and, you know, whatever, shoot with my red and make it cool. And I was like, well, yeah. So we were kind of like, oh, someone likes it. This is amazing. So that's kind of the mindset I've had with it. Like, oh, someone liked it. Wow. Which is really nice to feel that way about something. So hopefully I will feel that way going forward. But, you know, usually you're like, I don't know, my precious, like, I hope everyone likes it. You know what I mean?
Since you had to kind of create a fake persona that had an actual social media presence, does that make you want to kind of do more like micro films specifically for social media and YouTube?
The funny thing of this is that I'm so not that person. Like, I really despise social media, and I'm like, I don't have selfies. I'm not a girl who takes selfies. It's like not my jam in any way, shape, or form. And so I had to do so much of that for this. Like, oh my God, these like video, like, you know, all these selfies and whatever, like me doing all this stuff and doing all this social media stuff that I hated that part of it. So probably not so much, but it really is cool in that I mean, there's so many people doing really cool stuff, right? With TikTok, with all kinds of things, with social media forums, really embracing that and using it as a jumping off point to other things and whatever. So I totally mad props to them. But for me, probably not so much.
Well, that you've actually done real modeling, not Instagram modeling. So it doesn't, yeah. I couldn't see just like, oh yeah, I want to be an Instagram model. Actually, after doing in-studio modeling, I couldn't see that being a jump that you'd be like, oh, I'm proud of that.
Totally. Yeah. And no disrespect, like, right. Everyone get, you know, do your thing. Everyone's got their hustle. Yeah. But for me, it's just, it feels, I kind of, if I'm being totally honest, I kind of resent the faux importance of it. Cause it's come to the point where even sometimes when you audition for like legit TV and film, they'll be like, put your handle at the top of your resume. How many followers do you have? And you're like, come on, man. Like, how about my training and my credits and the stuff I've done for my craft? Like, it's like, really, you know. And sometimes when you, especially indie films too, or like mid-tier films, they'll be like, are you prepared to help us market this? And you're like, that's on you, you know. I'm an actor, you're the producer, so you're gonna figure out how to market it. So the fact that like so much of that is kind of expected, and like the importance of that in the grand scheme of things, I kind of find annoying as an art, you know. That sounds really pretentious as an artist, but I really do. Like, I feel like there's things that matter more than that, or that I wish would matter more than that. So yeah, it's clearly important and has its place, but yeah.
Do you feel that's going to become more of a detriment in the future for actors, that if they don't have a presence, they're going to be passed over?
It's interesting because I feel like it matters and it doesn't matter, you know. And of course, like everything, when you get to a certain point in your career, none of that matters at all, right? Like, if you're a huge name, you can do whatever you want. You can have a social media, yay, woohoo, great. People are gonna love it. Or you can be like, I don't do that, and no one cares. So it's kind of like that in-between space where you're like an average working actor, where it can give you an edge in some ways, because people can look at you and be like, oh, great, she's a built-in fan base, a built-in audience. That's even how companies do a lot of their deciding of casting and stuff on a big level. Like whatever, yeah. I know people who work in at various streaming site services, and they all kind of have their own weird little methods of determining who is going to bring the most viewership in, and social is a big part of it for a lot of them. So it is interesting. I don't know how we'll go. I also wonder at some point if we're all going to have like a rebellion against it on in some way, shape, or form. There's just like a lot of science behind the fact that it leads to like low self-esteem and anxiety and all kinds of stuff. I wonder if there'll be like ever, I don't know that there will, but if there'll ever be a backlash against it where we're all like, okay, this is enough, like, ugh, you know, or if it just continues to evolve. And yeah, I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. And it'll be interesting to see how what I think will evolve is like, I think people will get more specific in terms of tracking the correlation between like, does this actually lead to viewership for our film? Because I know a couple indie filmmakers who've purposely brought in influencers with huge social followings, you know, to have cameo roles in their films or whatnot. And the general consensus with that is that it really doesn't translate, because the people on social media, their fans are used to watching them for free. Now you're asking them to go rent this movie or buy this movie or whatever, and they're like, nah. So it doesn't always translate. Like, the fans who are willing to watch you for free, and you know you and feel like they're a part of your life and your stuff, aren't necessarily willing to spend money on you. So I wonder if people, if that will be the case like across the board, and then again people will be like, oh, it's actually not really worth it. You know, it actually doesn't really matter. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it affects things.
My last question is, where and when can people see LEXI?
Yeah, so it's out right now. We had a soft launch on Vimeo on demand while we're waiting for the other for it to go live on a few other platforms. Since we're self-distributing, we unfortunately don't have like leeway. We don't know exactly when it will be live, so it will be live very soon elsewhere. But for now, they can rent it on Vimeo on demand. And yeah, it should be live on Tubi and Amazon soon. So.
And what else do you have coming up?
Yeah. So
because I don't want to wait another 2 years before I randomly get an email from you. So
yes, don't
saying,
worry.
Look, I got something.
Alas, you will not. Yes. Oh, so the project that we filmed in October is another horror feature called Cold Blows the Wind. And we are in post on that right now. And that should be out later this year as well. We may end up doing a festival run with that, in which case it may not come out till early next year, but hopefully the end of this year. So that is much more traditional horror film. Obviously, LEXI is very unique. So that's about a couple that they go off for the girl's birthday, they drive drunk, they hit a jogger, they go to bury the body, and mysterious horror things ensue. So we shot that here in LA in October at a really cool location, and it's coming along really nicely in post. So I'm very excited to see how that all comes together. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you very much, Victoria. It's been good to have you on after this very long break, it seems like.
Totally.
So I hope to when your next film comes out, feel free to come back on. We'll talk about it. Thank you again. Thank you very much. It's always great to have you on.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to the Sixth Sense Media Podcast. You can find more of our celebrity, composer, musician, and filmmaker interviews, as well as pop culture roundtable discussions on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Pandora. Be sure to check out our vast library of entertainment industry coverage, including on-set reporting from your favorite TV series and movies at sixthsense.com.